Welcome to Education Perspectives. I am your host, Liza Holland. This is a podcast that explores the role of education in our society from a variety of lenses. Education needs to evolve to meet the needs of today and the future. Solving such huge issues requires understanding. Join me as we begin to explore the many perspectives of education.
Kapono Ciotti attributes his educational philosophy to his own schooling experience in a progressive, social-constructivist school during his early years in Honolulu, Hawaii. He taught in Honolulu, Hawaii, and Dakar, Senegal, for over a decade before moving into school leadership. Kapono has led schools in the United States and Egypt, where he put into practice the philosophy of students making the world a better place, shifting school culture to impact-based education practice. His strong belief in education is being an act of social justice drives his work. Kapono has worked internationally in educational change organizations, leading the work of deeper learning and place and culture-based pedagogy, and he is currently the executive director of What School Could Be. In these roles, he has trained teachers in over 100 schools and districts over 4 continents, impacting hundreds of thousands of students. In addition, Kapono spent 15 years as national faculty for the National Association of Independent Schools in Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice, facilitating national and international learning experiences. As a curriculum writer, he has authored multiple curricula for federal and nonprofit programs. His work has significantly contributed to the organizations of What School Could Be, the Buck Institute, EdLeader 21, the Pacific American Foundation, and many others. Kapono holds a Ph.D. in International Education Leadership from Northcentral University, a master's degree in social change and development from the University of Newcastle, and a Bachelors of Language and Culture from the Evergreen State College. He currently lives between Hawaii, Cairo, Egypt, and Dakar, Senegal. Welcome, Dr. Kapono Ciotti, or Ciotti, as you might say if you were in Italy. So glad to have you here.
It's a privilege. It's really nice to be here with you.
Fantastic. Well, let's kick off and go right to that 30,000-foot view question of why do you think that we as a society invest in education?
Why do we invest in education? I think it's interesting because I'll answer the question with a little bit of soapboxing and another question. I don't think we invest enough in education, and I think the question that as a society we still need to answer for ourselves is why should we? Because we certainly do. We don't invest enough in most pockets, or as an average. I think in certain pockets of the country and of people who can, we do. So why do we? I'll go back to What School Could Be founder Ted Dintersmith, and what he is so passionate about is education is the foundation of our democracy, but even more importantly, our society. Democracy being the governmental structure that we've decided is how we're going to govern our society. But just at its base level, how we interact as humans, how we build and manage our society, it starts with education. I think coming from Hawaii, which is where I was born, and on my mom's side being native Hawaiian, I would say that I also have a view, a maybe more broad view of education than many of my typical K-12 education friends, in that I really do believe that education is more and is beyond, deeper, broader, higher than just what happens in our K-12 classrooms. That maybe even back to older American values or old world values of the community being the school, the one school classroom, everybody in community being mentor to everybody else. So, okay, let me go back and amend what I said. I think that we don't necessarily invest enough in education, but we are educating, right? Whether we're purposeful about it, whether we're thoughtful about it, or whether it happens accidentally because we don't put the right structures in place, we are always growing humans in our society, whether in ways that we want to be, or accidentally ways that we want to be, or accidentally ways we don't want to be. We're always doing it.
I would agree with you. And I think that especially in this day and age when things are changing so fast, our time in the schoolroom is only a blip. We have to be lifelong learners and are constantly learning, whether it's in a classroom or not. And I also echo, we are not. We as a country are absolutely not investing enough in education to make the payoffs what we really want to have. I feel like we're striving really, really hard to win at the wrong game. So what drew you to education?
I think it's a little bit of the cliche of everything you needed to know, you knew and you learned in kindergarten. Two things. One is both of my parents were educators, so it was a little predetermined, maybe even genetically. My mom has taught from preschool through university, and my dad has taught 16 years in high school and 33 years in community college. So it is a little bit of a family affair, and I grew up in the halls of schools. And so it just kind of was. The other thing I would really credit is the gift I got of the early childhood plus elementary experience at a school here in Hawaii, Honolulu School. Maybe describe it as happiest place on earth. My brothers and I all got the opportunity to go there, and I've all commented in family dinners on Sundays that it wasn't until we left sixth grade for seventh grade that we understood why kids in the movies were trying to cut school, because we just had the most positive. It was a place where we wanted to be. School was fun. It was exploration. It was discovery. It was friends. It was learning, but learning was not a negative. So I'm still in touch with my kindergarten principal, Dr. Bob Peters, who is still my educational mentor. When I was a school leader here in Hawaii, we would meet monthly. Now that I've moved back and have a different role, we still get together about quarterly for lunch, and he still provides amazing guidance for me. I think that's the base of it. I think why am I still an educator? Why am I still working in education might be a question I should answer for myself more often. I think it goes back to the fact that education, I'll paraphrase a friend of mine, Ross Wenner from World Leadership School. Education is humans teaching humans to be human, and it's an ethical imperative of what's needed today.
That is a great quote right there. Very, very powerful. You've had quite a broad array of experiences in your education journey. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to teach in other countries.
Yeah, that's been really interesting. I started pre being a full-time employed teacher. I taught swimming in high school. That was pretty intense, actually. I didn't realize how much I learned from being a summertime kids swim teacher until later on when you're reflecting back on it. But 12 years private Catholic school, a bunch of years at a public charter school here in Hawaii, and then, like you said, going out internationally. Actually, I taught internationally before I started at Maryknoll as well. So I taught a year in West Africa, in Senegal, and 6 years as head of school at the American International School in Egypt, where I had a really interesting crash course in international education. It is amazing. I think as an educator that's worked towards inclusivity and a sense of belonging, and also as an educator who has a heart for Indigenous and Native education, it was interesting being at the American International School in another country, where many of our students were Egyptian or from a broad number of countries, but many of them from Egypt and the Middle East. Of course, tons of American students as well, and students from non-Middle Eastern countries. But it was fascinating to see the culture of international teaching, as well as the potential power of an internationally flavored education. I think at its worst, international education is another form of educational colonialism, and I do see that happening. but at its best, and I think our school aspired to be the best, and most schools that I know aspire to be the best of this. It's an amazing opportunity to give kids multiple tool sets of multiple perspectives to be successful in multiple cultures and multiple settings. And the kids that we graduate being multilingual, multicultural, it's just an amazing gift.
That it is. As I was reading your bio, I was thinking, I'm wondering, does he speak Arabic? Does he speak French in Senegal? Or lots of multilingualism when you go overseas. I know we had an opportunity to live in Belgium for quite some time and had to brush up hard on my French, let me tell you.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing at AIS in Egypt, where I was head of school, is it operates fully in English.
Yeah,
it is an amazing opportunity for kids from Egypt and the Middle East to operate in a full English environment, and still the school is firmly embedded in the community, which means that it's an opportunity for kids not from Egypt to have an integrated experience and not be at that school behind the walls where it's only green zone expat kids. It was a really amazing experience. My own kids got a lot out of being there.
Excellent. So you are now the executive director of What School Could Be. For those who may not be familiar with the community, can you tell me a little bit about what the whole community is about and what its approach to changing America's education system is?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction there. What School Could Be was founded by venture capitalist Ted Dintersmith and education guru and celebrity Sir Ken Robinson and author extraordinaire Tony Wagner. And with the help of Pasi Sahlberg, you might know Pasi as one of the godfather architect of the Finnish education system. So we have a really amazing background of how we were founded and the thought that went into What School Could Be. If I were to summarize it and paraphrase Ted, our strong belief is that the school system, as we know it, grade levels, disciplines, English, math, science, bells that ring and kids move from class to class, the standardized testing regime as we know it, basically the structure of school today is one that was in its time, 130, 140 years ago, extremely innovative and extremely successful in a time where the world was shifting from an agrarian economy to an industrial one. And it was actually, America's industrialists that, in typical American style, innovated and led the way and created this really, really cool school system from ideas around the world and served its purpose really well for about 100 years. Knowledge economy came around, and now we're in a data economy. Our data economy is quickly shifting to one that's about to be hijacked by machine learning and AI. We don't know the name of the next economy that's going to emerge. But our school systems today, as many YouTube videos and in fact, our major asset, the film Most Likely to Succeed, has outlined, our school system today still looks like it did 140 years ago. And it is not hyperbole, it's not cliche to say that we are today still preparing our kids for 1950, not 2050, and I would say not even 2024 anymore. The world around school has changed faster than we're able to navigate, and I don't know any educator who has said anything other than school systems as we know it, outside of a couple outlier organizations, super nimble schools. Schools feel like aircraft carriers that are hard to navigate. And we are just not set up to make the changes necessary to ensure that we're preparing our kids for 2050, let alone 2024. What School Could Be is dedicated to supporting individual teachers, individual school leaders, and school systems in making sure that we are doing everything we can to create systems that support our kids in being ready for their future, not our past.
That is definitely a massive need in our society moving forward. You're doing a kind of fun survey to help to plot that course a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
We are, and I think your listeners will be one of the first to really engage with it. Whatschoolcouldbe.org/survey. Maybe we can put it in the description, podcast description, and a link maybe?
They are in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. Whatschoolcouldbe.org/survey. It's a fun 15-second survey that helps specifically educators, but parents and students as well, kind of understand what decade their school is really preparing kids for. Encourage y'all to log on and participate in the survey. I think most of our schools are preparing kids somewhere from 1950 to 1980 to maybe 2000, maybe today. But very few of our schools are really preparing kids for their future. I was actually one of the impetuses for creating the survey was I was invited to be the professional development leader for Arizona State University's College of Education. They're the largest college of education in the entire United States. And interesting, ASU, pretty big fan. They are a gigantic, large R1, Research One, like the top tier research university. Yet they are, contrary to what you might think from being so large, really agile and really innovative. And their dean, amazing educational thinker, Carol Basil, introduced me in a really interesting way. She told her faculty, over the summer, Google changed its algorithm to deprioritize everything that's made us as successful as we are. Our size, our traditional degrees, the number of degrees, our research, our scholarship, all of that stuff. And Google has repositioned agile, badging, micro-credential, industry-generated learning in their algorithm when you go and look for learning on Google. And everything that made us strong is about to be our weakness. Therefore, if we don't engage in these conversations with Kapono, with what school could be, if we don't, take the survey and figure out how we evolve from it, we will be left behind and our strengths will become our weaknesses. Evolution is changing, and the traits that made us strong and survive are about to maybe make us extinct as organizations.
Well, I tell you, that's very heartwarming to me, because I know that a lot of our universities are probably going to be the last bastions of wanting to not change. But Arizona, I've been really impressed in other areas as well. Their innovation, their national, they are the hub for the National Association for Civil Discourse, and really looking at and doing some neat things from a building democracy standpoint that I think, honestly, we need to be infusing back into our education, because we need to be developing lifelong learners that are curious and wanting to be able to talk to one another. And that was one of the things that I really liked as I started to delve into the landscape model of learning that you've written, talking about that importance of student agency and their being in much more of a driver's seat. And I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit more about it.
Yeah, awesome. Landscape Model Learning publication by co-author, a friend of mine, Jennifer D. Klein, and I came out in 2022. The long story made short on the genesis of the ideas in the book, where Jennifer and I were at a conference sitting in the lobby discussing. At that point, I think there was a really big push, it was maybe over a decade ago, on access. And we were like, yeah, access, everybody needs access. This is awesome. And then, something flipped in one of us, and I forget who it was. And we were like, but access alone isn't enough. Just saying we open doors. Don't we want all kids to succeed? As a parent, I don't want you to just say as a school, I gave your kid access. I want them to facilitate that learning and at least aspire to facilitate success for my kids. I'm not saying that kids don't have agency in that. In fact, to the point that you started, we strongly believe that kids have agency in that. And in fact, it's many of the packaged curriculums and stuff that's coming out of these mega publishers, mega software companies, that is doing two things. It's deprofessionalizing teaching for our teachers. So I think that's number one point that I'd love to make here is I'm excited about AI. I'm excited about the software tools. This is not an episode on AI and AI tools, but I'm excited, and I hope educators, schools, parents, students are leaning into them and figuring them out, playing with them. And I'm also really nervous that big money, big industry, specifically, the multi-$100 billion a year software and educational publishing business worldwide is on the precipice. And I don't say this as a guess. I say this because I have been invited to sit into sales pitches. We, educational leaders, superintendents, principals, boards, I sit on a board. I just exited a position as a school leader. I am currently being marketed by software companies and publishers who have products that are potentially super exciting if we embrace, as Ross Wenner says, education being humans teaching humans to be human with the power of digital tools at our fingertips, or potentially terrifying, where I've seen pitches that look like replugging kids into a digital matrix and kids being data points with the AI taking over, all the knowing of a kid, all the decision making, really, and selling the decision making that should be in the hands of highly skilled professional teachers, selling it as a feature of AI, that the AI is going to make these decisions on what's next for kids to learn. So the potential hope that technology and AI brings, that I hope we lean into, comes with a potential fear that we need to address. All of that comes down to I'm really passionate about reprofessionalizing education and ensuring our educators are the most important profession ever to walk the planet, right? Like, we need to reinvigorate that for our teachers, for our educational leaders. We are all exhausted. Teachers are tired. Educational leaders have decision-making fatigue. And it's not COVID, it's post-COVID, it's all of this stuff, right? So landscape model of learning aspires to reprofessionalize education. It also, at its core, to what you said, aspires to give students that agency. And the term we use in the book that I'm really excited about is protagonism, student protagonism. Jennifer brought it back from her work as a school leader and professional development coach in Latin America. Comes from, a use in Spanish, protagonismo, and it kind of alludes to what I felt as a student in the elementary school that I told you. I really felt like the main character of my educational action film. I was my Jason Bourne. I was my James Bond. And I want you to be your Jane Bond, your Eliza Bond. I want to be Kapono Bond. I want to be the main character of my own education. But so many students feel like an extra in the movie that is their teacher's class. And so many of our teachers feel like an extra that is, the movie directed by their principal, their assistant principal, their board, whatever it is, right? And so the book really gives teachers and educational leaders the tools to build student agency at the highest level possible, which we call student protagonism. And it does so on a landscape. So I guess the other point I would make is we really believe, and we articulate in the book, that I think, unfortunately, in too many ed schools and too many initial student-teacher placements, initial teacher placements, teachers are given the metaphor implicitly, not told this, but implicitly, that education is kind of like a racetrack, and we line up August 1st, September 1st, whenever your school year starts. Students show up in their, highly tuned automobiles. The principal waves the checkered flag, and the students are off for 9 months of a race. And the teachers get to be race directors, and it's this very organized thing. We demand teachers facilitate their classes in this organized thing. Put your next standard on the board. And that would be lovely if that metaphor was true. It would be really good to plan that way if students really did show up at the start of the year all at the same time, in the same car, ready to go with gas in the tank. But, you and I spend time in schools and classrooms. That's not true. The metaphor doesn't hold true. And when we plan for a false metaphor, we end up creating lots of work for us. We end up going after the fact, needing to, quote unquote, differentiate or personalize because we planned for what we know is not true, the same thing at the same time in the same way for every kid. So the landscape model of learning asks us to change the metaphor And we propose that learning is more like a landscape, that the start of the school, many kids do join us on the meadow for the very starting day of school, but there's always that one kid up on the hill with a different vantage point yelling at everybody else, hey, come join me up here, look what I see. And there's kids that don't show up on the first day. As we go through, the units and the landscape, and we're navigating kids along the landscape, oftentimes as teachers, it feels more like herding cats, shepherding students along the landscape. And, we might have 20 of our kids with us here traversing the landscape, and we look around and where's, little Kapono? He's stuck in a bog. And now I got to make a decision as a teacher. Do I metaphorically leave these 20 kids and what they're doing? How do I have the time to go over to where Kapono is, metaphorically, academically? And, do I have the time to get him out of the bog and teach him how to forge the river, give him that skill that he needs to catch up with the class and navigate his own way once I get him to the class? Or many times as a teacher, I just yank him out of the bog, put him on my shoulders, ford the river for him, and plop him with everybody else because I don't have that time. And as teachers, we say, I need a specialist to come and rescue this kid. They need to give him the skills because we've set up the wrong metaphor. So the book asks us to change the metaphor, plan for the right metaphor. It provides both that kind of metaphorical thinking and structure around the three elements, but also provides in every element a list of and a how-to in strategies on how do we build student agency through protagonism and change the metaphor to a landscape metaphor.
You mentioned in there that you have some guiding principles as well, because this is a big change and sometimes it's hard for people to wrap their heads around a drastic types of change. Tell us a little bit about what people need to keep in mind as they look to make change on this kind of a scale.
Yeah, so I think the major thing in schools that I've been inspired from in writing the book and schools that we've worked with since writing the book is, number one, the time invested pre-teaching and learning, the start of school or summer planning, the outside of class time, teacher prep time, the time we can invest before teacher and kid are engaged in learning is invaluable and must be present to change systems. That doesn't mean you can't change your own classroom as a teacher, but that upfront investment is really important to seeing success. The other thing is there are already strategies that we are already using. I'll give you a really simple example. Most teachers have been exposed, specifically in elementary, to a KWL chart, Know, Wonder, Learn chart. If you haven't, don't worry about it. It's kind of a typical elementary tool of a certain generation that we have, three columns on a chart table. What do you already know? What are you wondering about? And then as we go through the lesson or unit, what now have we learned? And we chart that for students. So it is at its essence one of the simplest tools. It's a tool that many teachers already use or know about. And in the book, we give lots of ways to leverage a really simple tool to support student protagonism, to support our three elements of the landscape, the ecosystem, understanding who is in the room, the horizon, crafting goals that are specific to our community and our students, and pathway, making sure that we're personalizing learning, even within standard units or standardized systems that are beholden to standards.
That may be simple, but it is so incredibly powerful, and that would scale to any level of student. I don't care if you're a Ph.D. student, that type of a reflection is going to be powerful for you.
And, Jennifer and I have just came back from, it seemed like a time warp. Jennifer just came back from Colombia recently, and we were both in Colombia where we were doing work with this. And then I just came back from just outside of Seattle working with the Northwestern Association of Independent Schools, using these strategies with educators. So it doesn't matter if you're in preschool or 10th grade. It also doesn't matter if you're a youth student or an adult, that these strategies work. And I also think, to the school leaders who might be listening, I had a conversation with somebody recently about us as leaders needing to model. And then we paused for a second. It's not even modeling, because modeling assumes that we're doing it like fakely with us as adults so that we learn how to do it with kids, or we're doing it in this like petri dish with us as adults so we know how to do it with kids. Actually, it's about us genuinely engaging in the right ways. When I do professional learning as a consultant with schools, I'm very clear that I'm not a speaker. I'm a facilitator. As a teacher, I will not sit through another hour of professional development where I'm sitting and hearing somebody lecture at me on how I shouldn't lecture kids for an hour. But we do that to ourselves all the time. So it's not even about educational leaders or educational systems modeling this with educators so that they can use it with kids. It's about us living these tools, right? So actually the last whole section of the book is leading the landscape and how to implement it. And that whole last section is, how do we use this in our faculty meetings? How do we use this in our boardrooms and our senior leadership teams and our grade level meetings? Because again, it's not modeling, it's us. The same tools that we use to explore, discover, learn, the same things we do to understand who's in the ecosystem, our first element of the landscape, to develop our horizons and our goals, our second element, and to customize our pathway, personalize our pathway, our third element, hold true for a 4-year-old student, an 18-year-old student, or an adult teacher or leader.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much power in that kind of symmetry of learning, of allowing teachers to experience what we're hoping that they can create in their classrooms, to be able to take more of a coach and facilitator role. Allow these kids to be able to drive their own learning a bit and stop and ask the question, okay, we're doing this. This is what you know so far. What are you still interested in? What are you wondering about? How can we pursue that? And, there's always ways to be able to take kids down that interest road and still hit the learning targets that they've listed.
I completely agree. And I think oftentimes teachers are like, oh, you're talking about, I got to have a space unit for Liza and, a dinosaur unit for Kapono because that's our interest. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what are humans truly curious about? How do we ensure we're spending time to answer the question why? I was a high school social studies teacher for over a decade, 12 years, in teaching world history. And world history, you can literally be rich and famous. You can be, Mother Teresa and a saint. You can change the world and not know, the Roman emperors in chronological order. You don't need to know about ancient Greece. There's all of these things that we teach in world history that you actually don't need to know about. However, it was incumbent upon me as a world history teacher to ask myself and then ensure that I'm teaching through that lens of why? Why is this important? I believe it's important. I've learned lessons as a human being from the Roman Empire, from the fall of the Roman Empire. We're on a precipice of the things that look like the collapse of the Roman Empire politically right now. Are we learning lessons as a society on, rhetoric and speech and politics and civic engagement? And if we're not, as a world history teacher, I needed to figure out that why and that imperative of everything that we're doing.
That why in that context, I think, is so important. How many students have you ever, all through growing up, I remember, why do we have to know this? Why are we learning this? And if you as a teacher are not prepared to answer that question, I don't think you're really doing your job. But yeah, that's so exciting. And I think that it's great to hear that there are some real pathways being opened and whatnot. Obviously, this is a huge ship to turn, like we were talking about. But tell me a little bit about the biggest challenges that you see in trying to move our existing school systems into a more powerful facilitative classroom.
What are the challenges in moving the existing school system into this type of model? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Lots. Nothing insurmountable, though. I would say the biggest challenge is not being aware of the problem. So, what school could be, which we say, we need to prepare kids for 2050, not 1950. I think that the learning loss fever that hit after COVID has been a little bit of a red herring on this whole thing. And I want to be careful with this because there is learning loss. Learning loss is real. We should be paying attention to it. I'm glad the ESSER money was there. I'm glad it's been shown that that money well spent has done some really good things with student learning. I do want my own kid to learn grammar, or reading, writing. I want my own kids to learn the algorithms of math. And if you look at historic data versus, okay, so let's start with here. During COVID, test scores did go down. There's a couple anomalies. Interestingly, there are a couple school districts that during COVID test scores went up. Question mark. We might want to ask ourselves, why do kids not going to school make test scores go up in those districts? Those are anomalies, okay, but there were enough that the anomalies should be looked at. As a whole, though, test scores went down on average 2 to 3%. Some districts, some areas, maybe a little bit more, but there was a drop. So now if you look at the graphs that have been in the news for learning loss and have been showed to us as educators, I actually have a slide that I use in keynotes. The press zooms in on 10 points of the scale. So again, back to like us as humans, are we data savvy human beings? Is that a skill that we're teaching in school that we're leading? We're not, right? Whereas my friend Andrew Ho from Harvard says, humans are weak to numbers. We see numbers and we just melt under them, right? We are being shown in the press, in the media, zoomed in of 10 points of a 300-point scale, showing this meteoric drop, right? And being like, oh my God, freak out, learning loss. There is learning loss. I'm not saying there's not. Of 3, 4, 5 points is a huge amount of learning loss. It is. We know that. Yet the freak out graphs that were being shown are not the reality. Now you zoom out to NAEP scores. You zoom out to these standardized test scores from their inception till today, and you can see that, for example, during No Child Left Behind, when we stopped doing, I might be hyperbolic here, when we stopped doing basically all art, when we reduced PE to nothing, when we reduced recess time, when we stopped, when science became a once a month thing, when social studies became a once a month thing, and we dumped everything into drill and kill reading and math, our scores went up on average 2%. Then you look at the most disruptive years of education ever since we had the modern education system. Spanish flu, the modern education system wasn't around then. We had one school classrooms, we had apprenticeships, we had governesses educating, the privileged prince and princesses of the world. This K-12 school system that we see today wasn't there during the Spanish flu. We've, in the most disruptive years ever of education, we dropped only the same amount. So we drop everything, we go up 2 to 3%. We stop going to school for 2 years, we drop 2 to 3%. And when we come back, if you actually ask teachers in the field, they will tell you, yeah, I'm really concerned about learning loss. But you ask them, like, what are you really concerned about? They go to behaviors. They go to the social emotional. They'll go to like executive functioning skills. My kids don't even know how to be with each other. They don't know how to act. I'm spending so much of my time with discipline. I'm disempowered by the school system to support. You might hear teachers say deal with the discipline, but at its core, it's support the right decision-making, support executive functioning skills, support me as a human being, as a 5-year-old, being developmentally the right 5-year-old, as a 16-year-old, making 16-year-old right decisions, right? And having those supports around there, whether or not your community, social emotional learning can be a loaded word, but or a loaded term, right? But making sure that we are students of character, value, right decision-making, right executive functioning skills with all of those things in place. I think if you talk to teachers, that's what they would say is missing today. So I would say, to go back and give you an answer actually to your two questions, I would say anything that we can do in schools, bring back and also aspire to more of students leading their own learning. How do we increase student protagonism, which means not just giving students random freedoms, but developing students as actors of their own learning. You don't get to be Matt Damon if you don't know how to be a professional actor. And you don't need to wait till you're in high school to do project-based learning. These types of skills, learning how to make your own decisions as a learner, starts at early childhood. I visited a couple of years ago an early childhood classroom where preschool kids, 3 and 4-year-olds, at the end of the school year, were prompted by the teacher to start a discussion and held a student facilitated led discussion for 20 minutes.
That's phenomenal. I mean, it can be done. I visited a kindergarten classroom this year. They were doing design thinking and applying it to their science models and whatnot, and creating new developments and roller coasters and all kinds of different things. I think there's a couple of things to be said as to not over scaffold your kids. There's value in that productive struggle. There really is. And we have eliminated so much of it from our kids' childhoods, trying to be protection and keep them safe. We're also not letting them get scuffed up and learn how to figure things out on their own. So this has been such a fabulous discussion. I feel like we could continue to talk for days. But my final question would be, what would you like decision makers to know? And you can define that however you'd like to define decision makers.
Yeah, I would like decision makers to take the survey, whatschoolcouldbe.org/survey, and first figure out where their schools are really preparing kids for. I would like them to know that they are about to be, if they aren't already, upsold on potentially powerful and hopeful digital and AI tools, that they need to explore the use of those tools in a way that re-professionalizes and honors the professionality of teachers and humanizes students and gives us as human beings technology as a tool. And be very careful that we're not plugging in educators or students into a new metaphorical matrix, or ignoring these tools, because we will be left behind if we're not embracing this AI tools. Other places, other countries, other systems will be using technology and AI. It is extremely powerful. The answer is not blindly plugging human beings into this, nor is it ignoring it and being, purposeful Luddites and trying to ignore technology. I think that's number one. I think number two is that it is possible and it is probable that we create students as protagonists, students as actors of their own learning, and in doing so, solve the problems of discipline that are our excuses for not giving kids control. That we put ourselves into a self-fulfilling, never-exiting cycle of students can't, therefore I clamp down, therefore students can't, therefore I clamp down, therefore students can't. That there are pathways out. Those pathways out of that recurring cycle are obviously too much for our short podcast today. Would encourage people to check out the Landscape Model of Learning book. Check out my really good friend, Joy Marchese, and the work she's doing in positive discipline, and other really cool resources as well. That when students and educators are the main actors of their own learning and their own professionality, we have a joyful and productive school environment. And that, there are a very few but high leverage things that we can do that will make a huge difference. I'll end with one thing, that what school could be. We've the survey is a precursor to a really cool process and protocol that we're rolling out called Peak School Distinction. Peak is our acronym for purpose. P is for purpose. E is for essential skills that are of learning. A is for student agency, like Protagonism, and K is for deep retained and applied knowledge. The K is for knowledge. And so this Peak School Distinction is a protocol that we're going through with schools and districts. If your listeners are part of a school or district that is already doing really cool things, we would love to hear from you and confer to you a badge of distinction. What School Could Be, as you know, is powered by some really amazing minds, Ted and Sir Ken Robinson and Tony Wagner and Pasi Sahlberg and crew. And we would love to work with you to confer to you Peak School Distinction, to distinguish yourself from other organizations. And if you want to work towards that, if you're actively working towards it, we would love to be your nonprofit partner in providing the ongoing professional learning and strategic planning to get there.
That is fantastic. And I'm going to have to give an extra shout out to the community at What School Could Be. You do not have to be a teacher. You do not have to be an administrator. You just have to have some sort of interest in education. And it gives you access to an incredibly thought-provoking community of folks that are looking to move education forward. And so it doesn't cost you anything. Sign on and become part of What School Could Be. Kapono, thank you so very much for joining me today. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Education Perspectives. Feel free to share your thoughts on our Facebook page. Let us know which education perspectives you would like to hear or share. Please subscribe and share with your friends.